Ghost project was my first full-time venture into fine art in an attempt to create a cohesive gallery show with a continuous style and theme throughout. I'd been an artist my entire life, but in 2014 was the first time that I decided to leave the fashion industry behind and focus on a career in fine art. I had delved into several different styles of fine art throughout my life, from portraiture to more graphic art and comic book art. And I think the Ghost project captured a little bit of all of that in one project. The idea was to create an interactive gallery show complete with lighting and music in an environment that would switch between traditional fluorescent gallery lighting and black lighting, revealing the ultraviolet glow-in-the-dark aspect of the Ghost artworks. I had also been quite interested in interior design over the years, and I was very drawn to a specific style called saloon style of hanging artworks, very interested in old frames and vintage frames. And so with the Ghost project, on the gallery side of it, a very important aspect of it was matching these some new and some antique and vintage frames with the artworks, and even modifying those frames as well at sometimes to make them really a part of the artwork themselves and not just a frame that was added by a collector. The whole Ghost concept really began with the one tiptoe Ghost illustration, which then led me to a series of many other ideas of classic style Ghost illustrations in various poses and various settings, which from there went on to more and more abstracted settings and concepts within the universe I was creating for Ghost, of different scenarios of death and the afterlife, and some of them more comedic, some of them more macabre, but keeping the consistent theme of the caped or hooded ghost figure, a classic Halloween ghost you could call it, and in the same 2 or 3 tone color palette of black, glow in the dark, and at times red for the use of blood. I really just let my imagination run wild in trying to find the perfect Ghost illustration, style, pose, environment, and so many different scenes came forward out of that investigation. The inspiration for Ghost was, first and foremost, I would say, Halloween and my love for all things Halloween and Halloween themed. However, with the Ghost project, I really didn't want it to be just a Halloween art project. I really wanted to be more focused on just the Ghost aspect of things and really leave out all the pumpkins and skeletons and other things that are typically associated with Halloween, and have this be more of a contemplation on the afterlife itself that would be relevant year-round, potentially. I mean, for someone that has a little more of a Gothic taste and sensibility, it's a bit of the ministry mentality of every day is Halloween here in the Ghost world. In terms of the style of the collection, it draws heavily on my background in comic book illustration. As an artist, I've always taken a lot of inspiration from Andy Warhol and love the idea of prints that also have a hand-painted element to them, something that can be reproduced but with infinite variations, and that's really what the Ghost project became. And at the stage it's at now, with the gallery collection that I present here, really every piece is only illustrated one time. And so when I was creating these pieces, I was seeing them as silk screens, making many, many copies, or t-shirts produced in bulk. But what has been the result is really something very unique and special, in that each one of these illustrations I spent so much time on the computer creating, and now it is really primarily only captured in the one painting that you will see on the wall that's part of the gallery installation. And so in that way, each piece really did become all the more unique. I definitely drew inspiration from the Halloween graphics of big corporate mega brands, such as McDonald's and Hallmark's, that put out, either Halloween cards or Halloween Happy Meal toys, and just things that really evoke that classic Halloween and ghostly sensibility. I think there was also a little bit of inspiration taken from the Casper the Ghost TV and movie series, with the theme that, there are these mysterious, legless, caped figures that are somehow connected to the afterlife and humans in the afterlife. And just really thinking about what is the psychology of being in that state. Why are humans, as living people, afraid of ghosts that are literally non-physical humans in the afterworld? And what is the ghost's real intention of scaring a human? Why don't we consider ghosts to be like Casper the Friendly Ghost, just friendly friends that hang around us? Why are so many people scared of them? And so I kind of took that question and that psychological comparison to the extreme to propose this idea that not only do these ghosts want to scare the humans, they want to scare the humans to scare them to death, to bring them into the ghost world themselves, and that these ghosts actually want to kill the humans is the next step in that thought process, which again is a little bit macabre, but is presented in a very playful and ironic way, such as, for example, ghost eating a bowl of eyeballs. These are not super serious scenarios, but rather something to sort of lighten the atmosphere of the intense fear that most people have around ghosts and supernatural phenomenon of the like. The category of the ghost installation is definitely contemporary art, and the medium is mixed medium on all the different pieces. Most of them began as pencil illustrations, which were then converted into digital illustrations on the computer. Those are then printed out with blank backgrounds, and then the black or abstracted gray-black backgrounds were created by hand in various mediums, mostly acrylic paint, some of them in decoupage techniques, which is layering of different papers or layers on top of each other and fusing them together with a glue or a varnish medium in acrylic, which is what a lot of the pieces with a velvet background incorporate. The very original concept for ghosts, which was even closer to more like a Warhol medium, was to do plastisol screen prints on actual velvet. But I learned early on in the project that screen printing onto velvet is not an easy proposition. I also considered the technique of screen printing an adhesive onto the canvas and then electrostatic flocking the velvet onto the black areas of the print. But an electrostatic flocking machine of that size would have been very difficult to obtain. So I essentially had to create the layered and the multi-surface effects that I wanted by hand techniques, such as decoupage and painting by hand, which was much more labor and time intensive, but I think that resulted in a more unique product in the end that's a very hand feeling to it. None of these were just produced off a machine or two machines, but they all have a very intensive hand aspect to them. Even the ones with a solid velvet background was a hand-painted decoupage performed by myself. And so I had an elaborate system using glass panes to press these things flat while they were drying, so there was no bubbles, kept everything very flat and even. And it was just a lot of techniques that I had to invent myself. And for some of the pieces that have abstract black backgrounds and paper decoupaged onto the base, I went through a whole process, a whole investigation of creating various abstracted textures with black paper and other mediums and fluid acrylics to create a whole series, a whole abstract series of pure black artworks, which were then cut up and abstracted into the backgrounds of these actual illustrations. And so it's really, you're looking at almost two projects in one that are fused together in the decoupage technique. And those black backgrounds were created with all different techniques. Some of the most wild ones I remember was adhering the black paper onto a board, putting weights on top of it and dragging it over cement to create a linear sort of scrape technique on this black paper, which when the black came off, it was white underneath. And that abstract series of artworks I still use in my artworks for Deep State Mapping Project today in my catalog of stock and different textured images that I have of my own personal work, that some of the original ghost abstract compositions actually ended up on some of the newest Deep State Mapping Project diagrams, including as the background of the D-Web, our latest diagram released in late 2024. So there's a lot of thought that went into both the illustrations itself as well as the abstract negative space backgrounds of each of these pieces. Some of the pieces that integrate glitter or sand were definitely inspired by the seasonal greeting cards you see that usually have screen printed or electrostatically flocked glitter and sand on a greeting card. But this is sort of like a permanent extra large greeting card, which, you know, we always love when we receive cards, and we always kind of, you know, treasure them and marvel at the artwork, what was integrated in a little 5x7 card. And so I think I always wanted a way to sort of preserve something like that and magnify it. And so that's exactly what some of these ghost illustrations do. The frames were also a really important part of the finished pieces, which I consider all the frames to be actually part of the artwork themselves. Some of the frames were new, some were vintage, and many of them were either hand-painted or hand-adjusted by myself. Some of the frames even integrating some of the textures from the actual artwork onto the frame themselves. And so it really is a full-on mixed media piece that can almost be considered like a hanging sculpture, some of them. And I can guarantee you that some of these frames will never be found again because they are from a bygone era. Like this one specifically was found on eBay and came all the way from Europe. So these frames have a whole history of their own. And I just love the way the frames complement the artwork and the artworks complement the frames. There's so many pieces in the series that I love, and even so many illustrations that maybe they're printed small for the actual gallery show, but one day I would love to see them printed much bigger, even on a monumental scale, some of them. I really like the playful ones, like the demonoid ghost and the collector who is holding a saw and carrying a head. The illustrations became more and more detailed as I went on in the project, like the Awakening, which is probably the largest and the most detailed one of all of them, which has all the little leaves of an old graveyard and all the little worms and dirt on the grave where the ghost is emerging from. The Ghost of Mozart is probably another one of my favorites, which there is actually two versions of, the simple version with the black background and a much more elaborate version with the whole shaded Baroque room in the background. But I have to say, of the final pieces in the final Ghost show, probably my favorite is what we're now calling Distracted Driver. It used to be actually called Victory. But the Distracted Driver was probably one of my favorite illustrations that also received one of my favorite abstract compositions as its background and went in my favorite frame I found in the whole series. So that one is really, for me, like the trifecta of everything that was most important about Ghost. And that one also incorporates the ivory lace matting around the picture itself, which I thought the lace matting was really a fitting to the Ghost's sort of Victorian theme of the entire project. There's a sort of like a Victorian Baroque Rococo theme in all of the decor within the Ghost illustrations and within the frames as well. And if I had to choose a second most classic illustration after Tiptoe Ghost, of course, it would probably be Mr. Spooky, which only ended up being a fairly small, about 5x7 print in the gallery exhibition. But I think that that one really captures the attitude that I was going for in searching for the quote-unquote perfect Ghost illustration. The Ghost artwork is for people who have a love of all things alternative, of the horror genre, people who have a sense of humor that might be a little bit sick at times, people who have a love for Halloween, and perhaps a passion for the supernatural and psychic phenomenon. The concept of ghosts goes way beyond just Halloween and delves very deeply into the ideas of timelessness and Baroque, Victorian, enduring beauty. But at the same time, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It juxtaposes potentially very serious situations with expressions of either joy or surprise or amusement. And so I think even for myself, I was afraid of ghosts for a lot of my life, and even afraid of there being ghosts in my house, the house that I created this project in. And over the course of creating this project, I think I really faced that fear. And by just kind of putting myself in the ghost's shoes in so many different circumstances, it really sort of alleviated my fear, because it's sort of ridiculous to think that, ghosts really want to kill people, that they're out for blood, that somehow they want to drink this blood to become human again. That's the sort of absurdist concept that this series entertains. And by really thinking about what do ghosts really want from humans, do they really want to scare us? Do they want to torture us? And how can they really do it if they don't have actual bodies, if they're just these amorphous beings that float around beyond our perception? For me, it alleviated a lot of the fear. And I think by hanging some of these artworks in your home and having them glow in the dark when you turn the lights off, it could maybe warm your heart a little bit, make you chuckle instead of actually being afraid of the ghosts in your house. It's about maybe making peace with them, understanding them, and maybe actually even helping them transition, from being in purgatory to a more permanent resting place in the afterlife.